So, hello and welcome, Ajay. Thank you for taking our time on a Monday morning to have this conversation with me. And I'm so happy to begin a week by talking to another fellow storyteller who I admire and I love the work that you do. For the sake of everyone, we're going to announce a little collaboration that the two of us are doing with our respective organizations. Ajay with the Kahani Project, which is a not-for-profit, and your Story Bag, which is a partnership firm in the realm of storytelling, because I think when storytellers collaborate, amazing things happen. So what are we promising? What do we want to do? What is this collaboration all about? And where do we want to take it? We're going to discuss it. So let's begin with Ajay. Ajay, do you remember where we first met?
Yeah, very distinctly. What I remember is watching the storyteller emerge from behind the table with a costume on, and you were telling, I think you were telling the story of Jim Corbett, and very playful, very dramatic, full of expressions. Using the space and the movement. I just loved it. There was so much impromptu-ness there. There was so much expression there, and the children just loved it because there was so much interaction happening in that space. Yeah.
Now think of it. We met in Bukaru, Jaipur. This was in the peak of summer in Jaipur. It was extremely hot, and we were worried that in June, who's going to step out for a literature festival out in the open? And all of us were a little fretting about the fact that, it's going to be a little uncomfortable for the children, whether they'll sit, whether there'll be enough numbers. And yes, there were many children who came to listen to us. And I remember Ajay very distinctly, like the way he remembers me for the way I told the story. And I remember distinctly because he had a set of children. And the one thing I know, he's telling a story, and suddenly, and I remember it was a Bengali folk tale you were telling. And in the middle of the story, I see him just tell this one kid, why don't you stand up? And he picks this kid and puts him on his shoulder. And the moment he does it, the child is like, wow, where am I? And he becomes a character in the story. He climbs off on your shoulder. And then I remember watching the other kids, because as storytellers, while we are watching a storyteller perform, we're also seeing how are the children and the audience responding, because that's important lessons. And I was looking at all the faces in the audience. They were delighted. They wanted to be on their shoulders, and I'm sure they were thinking that, okay, does this guy only get this privilege, or do we also climb onto him? I think, and I thought, I can't carry anyone on my shoulders, and I don't think I can do it. But I loved the fact that the children just instantly, their body language changed, instantly their willingness to listen to that story changed. They were very participatory. And they were very participative. So that's why it was very exciting to think that children can get so overjoyed, absolutely overjoyed by something as simple as bringing them into that story. Yeah. Ajay, you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And there's a little story behind that. Go
ahead, tell me that.
Because I'm an accidental storyteller. So I started the Kahani Project without being a storyteller. So and my idea was to kind of create like a place or a platform where storytellers could come in. But having such poor networking skills and relationship building skills that I have, I'm quite a person who likes to work individually, independently. I figured that I would reach these places to tell stories, but have no storytellers. Yeah. And the first place that I actually started telling stories was, as a part of the Kahani Project, was a school for the visually impaired children. And the first thing that I understood is touch is very important, in the whole process of telling. So the children would actually come, they would huddle very close to me. Yeah. They would touch my throat, they would touch my cheek to be able to understand the vibrations, to kind of get a full sensory experience of the storyteller. Mm-hmm. Luckily, the story that you were telling me, the Bengali folk tale, was told by my grandmother. That was the only story I knew at that point of time. but so it went, and it just kind of became very interesting. The children loved it. I figured that I could tell stories. So my initiation into that storytelling world was through while doing storytelling with visually impaired children. So it was very important how you used your voice, how you used they can't see the movement and all, but what they can do is they can touch, they can feel the vibrations. And that's where I got the idea of picking somebody up on my shoulder. It also meant that you create that very trusting environment between the child and you. Yeah. So that's just a little bit of a story behind that story. Yeah.
and I'm picking up from what you just said that storytelling is actually multisensorial.
Yes.
We put a lot of focus as performance storytellers. We put a lot of focus on the visual, which is what can you see.
Yeah.
But storytelling is as much about the rest of the senses and how a storyteller evokes it, or how a listener draws out those experiences by just touching, feeling, listening, and emoting at the end of the day. So for somebody like a visually impaired audience, I think the whole sense of touch is the first intervention that they would want, because whether you're making funny faces, it does not matter to them. But can they see you up there? They can touch you and experience that face, or picture the face by touching your face. I think that's what's very important for your audience. And
a caveat there is that and I just want to kind of put that out, is that the touch is only when you have the trust.
Yeah.
And this was a school for the boys, and this was with in the presence of their teachers and facilitators.
Yes.
So it's a very trusting space. It's a space in which you're first ensured that you are being accepted as a person who is coming in with that the storytelling intentionality, and the children accept you in that space. So it's a very elder brotherly kind of a space that you first create, or else and I've had discussions with other storytellers about this, about touch and sensory experiences. It's a very big discussion point which can emerge, but just to kind of put that out, you wouldn't want to do that.
Of course, how close do you get to your audience?
Exactly.
And how close do you let them get to you?
Yes.
And because we're talking about creating a safe space in all parameters, of course, in physical terms as well. And I could totally understand the bells it may ring in people's minds, that why will somebody allow a child to touch somebody who is not from their environment? I can totally understand that. But how old were these children, Ajay?
So these were lower kindergarten. So UKG, upper KG, first standard till about fifth grade. That's the audience, that's the group.
About 10 years of age. So we're roughly from 2.5, 4 to 10 years of age. Okay, that's a very impressionable age.
Yeah.
And in all parameters, it's an extremely. So the Kahani Project started as a platform to bring audio stories for the children that you started working with. And therefore it's interesting because storytelling, like I was saying, it can be multisensorial, and what we see is what we believe in, but what we hear is another format of what we are consuming and what it can lead to. So can you tell us a little bit more about while you were volunteering, while you were creating audio stories, then what told you that the Kahani Project needs to be made, or this platform needs to be built?
Yeah. So what happened was, I had some very intense personal life experiences around that point of time. There were lots of things happening. Left my very plush corporate job. Realized that a lot of things had changed meaning in my life, and that's the point of time. There was a sense of what's your calling, what's your passion, how are you contributing not just to yourself but to people around you. And I always wanted to work with children. That was my space. And I used to do a lot of theater earlier, but I realized that one of the things which was not available then, and this is 2012, this is just the point of time when storytelling itself in the modern form that we see today was kind of lifting off in India. there weren't too many audio resources available for visually impaired children. I did some research on Braille, and Braille is beautiful. But there are some challenges, logistical challenges. The Braille books can be bigger. There aren't enough Braille printers, so library can't stock as many. So we tried to figure out what's the solution. Can technology solve that? And the immediate answer was, why not do audio stories? It was already being done in a lot of places in the West. And I realized that that's the way to go. How can we and you can rapidly build that up. So our first experiment was just ask people to record things at home. And before we knew, we had about 100 stories recorded. Yeah. We would go to schools, we would do these storythons where children would come and record, or adults would come and record, teachers would come and record. And one day you would record like 40, 45 stories and put them in the library. That was a great phase, just that kind of, this is, by the way, this is before podcasts actually became.
I was going to come to that. I want to remind everybody that this was before podcasting became podcasting. And so, you have to go to a SoundCloud or something like that, that kind of a platform to hear a story. Yeah. A little bit about, so were people telling stories or were people reading out stories?
So most people were reading out. There were very few tellers, tellers like you and your associates there. Then there were, some of them which I was very privileged to work with and find to work with. In Pune, there was a storytelling group. But I found greater acceptance from, people who were not storytellers. I found greater acceptance from older parents, grandmothers. I found acceptance from teachers and people who just wanted to do it as a voluntary thing. Mm-hmm. So obviously the quality wasn't that great. You wouldn't get quality like you would get on a professional podcast. But I realized that, it didn't matter. We would get like 1,000 people listening to stories in a week sometimes. All sorts of audience coming from across the world. We just put it up on our site with no marketing, no engagement. There was no Instagram at that point of time. There was only Facebook. But we found that people from across the world were listening to stories, and including the children that we were doing it with. So
even languages. I think that's what. Yeah, let's talk about the languages that you put on your.
Exactly. So the moment we, the interesting thing was that the moment we went into grandmothers and grandfathers telling stories, recording stories, they became very local language. Yeah. So we had Bengali, Marathi. I was in Pune, so Marathi. There was Hindi. There was Tamil, Kannada. All sorts of languages coming in. So we got the diversity. Although the quality isn't that of a professional podcast. Like if you listen to one of those very professionally recorded podcasts with background music, this is not what it is. But we don't care. The children don't care. The children just want more. So we would typically record stories through the week, and then on a Saturday, go to the school, put out an audio system and play out the stories. And the children would love it because they're not listening to only Ajay, they're listening to 5 other storytellers from across the world.
I think that's the beauty, because they're not listening to only one storyteller. Every storyteller brings with him or her, whether professional or not professional, they bring with them a very unique quality of their voice, their personality, of their intent behind telling a story. And I think this diversity is what children love the most. They like to identify a sound. They like to picture that person telling it to them. And then they soak in the story much better. And like you rightly said, Ajay, children will not distinguish between or discriminate between a good audio and a great audio podcast, or a professionally done podcast or a well-intentionally done audio story on a platform like yours. And I think that's where acceptance is so important. As even storytellers, we talk about the fact that yes, quality work is very important. It's also more important that your audience accepts your work. And that's what you've been able to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's this thing that, I would love for, very studio quality, professionally recorded audio to go out. But hey, that's expensive. We are a not-for-profit, open source CC licensed. Everything that we do is Creative Commons licensed. And it is community generated. So the community creates it for the consumption of the community. So although we have some guidelines around, articulation, content, no stereotypes and things like that in our content, but we don't kind of most of the quality checks are just very, very basic. Just it should not have too much background noise and stuff like that. So that's the only quality parameter that we work with.
Right. All right. And tell me something about, in terms of picking the kind of people that came to, did people come organically to you that I want to record, I want to volunteer, or did you go scouting for people?
A little bit of both. So as I said, I'm not very good at, building very networking and which I figured that's a big ask for what I was trying to do. So there were more people reaching out to me than I was reaching out to them. And it didn't help that I was working on my other startup at that point of time as well. So a lot of people would reach out and, I wouldn't be able to communicate with them immediately. And so a lot of storytellers, I'm sure, who, wanted to contribute, it didn't end up because guess what? One man army couldn't kind of scale up to getting everybody. But nonetheless, a lot of people still started contributing, working, sending stuff. People who draw a lot of energy from this. We've got very senior doctors who contribute stories, and they would call up and say, "Ajay, kitte bachchon ne suna?" They have that curiosity of knowing, and they would call back and say, "This is one of the most important things that I do in my life, to tell these stories." So that's been great. The diversity of people that you get, and also how you kind of curate these stories. Very early on, very interestingly, very early on, I met Arvind Gupta ji. He used to be the director of the Nehru Science Center in Ayuka in Pune. Then he used to run the Science Center. He recorded two one story and our poem, Hirendranath Chattopadhyay's Nao Chali. Yeah, that's a very funny poem. And when I met him, it kind of gave us the overall value compass for what we are trying to do. Yeah, and he used to translate and used to publish this Bharat Gyan Vigyan Samiti, these very simple books. He, in fact, was the person who gifted me Sadako and the 1,000 Paper Cranes, both in Hindi and English. That went as a story. That was one of our first long format stories on the Kahani Project. And it's a lot of that mentorship. I just met him a couple of times. It's just the kind of the value compass, what do you want to achieve with this was set there and then. He said a beautiful thing. He said, "Are your stories downloadable?" Yeah. And I said, yes. Then he said, fantastic. That means you're a true believer of open source and Creative Commons. Yeah. And that's been the kind of the compass for us, that generate stuff that people create for people.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said about having that value compass and understanding why are you doing what you're doing is so important, especially for a project like yours, because it has to be value and purpose oriented, so that people see that value and purpose and want to be part of your mission and want to strengthen it, want to take it forward. And I think that is what draws me towards Kahani Project. Over the years, I have recommended Kahani Project, your website, to several of my students who have taught in Delhi University. And there was this dearth of stories, because not good quality, there are good quality stories, poor quality stories, but they will have to sift through stories to find out what is the good and what's poor, right? And for them to access audio stories, and that as a format that it can do amazing things. And that there are platforms like the Kahani Project, which will make a story available to you, and it's community generated for them to see the value behind it. So Kahani Project has been my go-to resource for a lot of things, including while I'm teaching and training.
Thanks.
Thanks to you, I've also have a podcast because Kahani Project never wrote to me, never asked me, will you like to give? And I was waiting, like other people, like you said, the solo worker of his own company. I'm also the solo worker of my own company. And I said, I wait for an opportunity, let's create my own. So I started a podcast called Golpo Stories from Around the World, in which I tell stories in 3 languages, the 3 languages which I speak, English, Hindi, and Bangla. Right. And for me, to put that story out was also because somebody approached me saying, can you do audio stories for us? And they were paying for that. So I said, okay, fine. If I'm being paid to create audio stories and I get to do it for you, I will also put it on my podcast. Why not? And I've already been paid for it. So I keep it, I think. But what I'm trying to get at is that, creating good quality work consistently needs a lot of patience, needs a lot of purpose, needs a lot of push. It also needs, a timeline to keep that engine running.
Correct.
And which is what you've been managed to do at the Kahani Project. I believe now you're taking a little of your hands off from it so that it runs with it. So what is your vision for it now? What do you think? Where are you poised? And what you've been able to do and what do you want to do next with the Kahani Project? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of my mentors in school used to say, "Hathi ke do tarike ke daant hote hain, ek dikhane ke aur ek chabane ke." So a lot of the website, what we do externally is the dikhane wale daant. The core work that we want to do is to make audio stories and available to children who don't have access. So have processes or methods of kind of being able to take them to the visually disabled children or to children, in a basti, in a slum cluster who don't have access to libraries. But interestingly, most of them now over the last 8 or 10 years probably have some kind of an access to a smartphone or a normal phone, a feature phone, which can play out MP3. Yeah, basically so the device ecosystem has become very nice. We also have more than 1,000 stories in our library now, in different languages. So the simple vision is, how do we kind of take all of these stories and set up the distribution such that we can reach out to more and more children, particularly the visually disabled children who still don't have access, and the pandemic has set it back many years back again. So most of the learning centers and schools shut down. The kids went back home. Most of the learning centers for the visually disabled worked as living spaces. So they used to live there. So they went back home. I don't know where those children are now till the schools reopen. So the whole idea is that how do we just kind of take these 1,000, 1,200 stories and kind of ensure that every child has had their heart full and stomach full of, like you and I, we listening to stories. That's the whole idea. I'll give you one small, simple, we used to work in in Koregaon Park in Pune. There is the boys blind school, which I was telling you about. We did a 3.5-4 year after school, storytelling session, which will happen on Saturdays, weekends, Fridays. Those kids must have heard at least 350 different stories. So when sometimes we used to get storytellers from storytellers there, they would start a story and say, "Arey, dada humne ye suna hai, kahani suna hai." That's what I want. I want every child to kind of say, I have heard so many stories that, my heart is full, that I've heard as many as anybody else has. That's the agenda. That's the only goal that we have. I don't know how we'll reach that, but that's still the premise.
No, of course we'll get there. It's everything starts with a purpose, with a goal, with like I say, a destination, and then you set your GPS and find the way. You need to put that GPS
exactly,
and say that, okay, this is where I want to go. I can go left, right, straight, or up, down the hill, but I will get there. So I think that is very, very important. And then once you reach there, you find that, there's another goal, there's another destination that you need to go to. So you keep walking and you keep doing. It's never an absolute end. So let me just tell you, okay, this is what we did. at your story bag, I've been following Ajay and his amazing Kahani Project for a while. And now that everybody is up to speed of what the Kahani Project is all about, go ahead and take a look at the link. It's there in the comments in the description below. So go ahead and take a look at it and listen to some amazing stories which you've not heard so far. And if you'd like to volunteer, please go ahead. This is the man, he's responsible. So he will make sure that he'll get a story out from you if you want to volunteer. So like with everybody else, I've been a big fan of the Kahani Project. And I think somewhere our vision and our approach and our intent aligns and you can only know that we've not been talking so much of late, but I think because you see somebody's work, you sort of understand that, yeah, I think we are on the same path. We are going towards the same destination. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about and which I've been strongly working towards is to develop an ecosystem of storytellers in the country. Not just because it's part of my work as a story trainer. I do train a substantial amount, a good modest number of storytellers every year. It's less than 50 every year, but there's a reason behind it. That's because I want to create value-driven, purposeful storytellers who are willing to go the whole hog and they're willing to contribute and create an ecosystem where they make stories accessible for everybody. And they are also able to create a sustainable identity or a sustainable path for themselves. Sustainability is very important because not everything can be run on volunteerism. So while I do agree with Ajay and his mission and his purpose, but a professional storyteller who spends some money, who is looking at earning a salary or an income at the end of the month, cannot do it beyond without a fee forever. So which is where we need to balance the two sides of a storyteller on what the storytellers can do. And here I'm talking about professional storytellers. So when I looked at Ajay and his model, and I felt that and not just for him, it's for all other not-for-profits who've approached me over the years. Can you come and do a training? Can you come and do a storytelling for us? We would like you to do this, that, and whatever. We have very little budget. We have no budget. Because your stories need to go to so many people. I agree with all of it, but I know for a fact that if I keep doing it for free or for low value amount, for whatever the budget is, I will not be able to make it sustainable. Someday or the other, I'll have to choose between this and the other, because that's where I'll have to run my house, I have to run my business, I have to create that value. So how do we marry the two? So sometime last year, we started talking about it. My network of storytellers is called YSB Tribe of Storytellers. And it's coming together of a little more than 120 storytellers in the country. Wow. But not all of them are running it professionally. By professionally, I mean that they don't do anything else, but they only do storytelling. Okay, so that's when they are professionally storytellers. And a lot of them are part-time storytellers who would like to be part of a project, would like to contribute. They don't know where to begin. So together, when I was looking at all the permutation combinations and the purpose, I thought of something called Gift a Story, which is a value-based approach to take storytelling to all the deeper pockets of the country, to make it accessible, so that, like Ajay says, that I should be able to take stories to children where they say, oh, I've heard this story before. And it should not be, what is a story? I've never heard a story before. So, to just change that perception of the child from never having heard a story before to somebody saying, oh, I heard stories and I know many stories and I know the story that you're going to tell me. So to create that, to make it available to everyone, even when they don't have the money for it. Technology, we know, is moving. There is now modern technology, accessible, easy, cheap technology, which will make storytelling available to people. But we still need that process, that path, that bridge, that route map to make it get from our intent to that audience. So that's what Gift a Story was initiated as, which is a concept where we crowdfund for a certain project. And we say that, okay, if we want to tell stories to this batch of children for X number of days, months, and years, we will service them, create a program for them. If you want us to train their educators, their teachers, their facilitators, we will raise funds for it, crowdsource it, or take it to a sponsor and raise money, and our storytellers will service it. They will also service it, not at the market price, but at a lesser price, just to ensure that the 100% of it goes to the storytellers and to the project to create whatever resource. So if it requires to make a technology platform, we'll invest in that to make it. So nothing is being kept by your story bag at all. It only goes to the investment. So that was one thing that we started. The other thing was to ensure that our storytellers get to experience and reach out to newer audience with their vernacular languages. And we're discussing this on International Mother Language Day because it's for a reason. That Kahani Project has been able to use Indian languages and create stories in Indian languages, which is reaching out to a large variety of audiences, right? And we want to be able to collaborate together to reach out to all the audiences, whether it is listeners in India who have access to technology, who have access to knowledge, who have access to stories and storytellers, but even the marginalized who need the stories, who don't know that we exist, and the kind of children that Ajay works with. And at the same time, maybe children abroad who are coming and listening to Indian stories. So how can we cater to all these audiences and tell stories together with the Kahani Project, as well as my tribe of storytellers, the YSB tribe of storytellers coming together. So that's the more or less the kind of integration that we started seeing. Ajay, what do you think we will be able to do? What do you think? Where will we be able to take this collaboration?
Yeah, so I'm very excited about the possibilities. I was just looking at our stats yesterday, for example. So apart from India, which obviously people listen to a lot of stories, it's very interesting that US, Canada, and Pakistan are the three other countries which comes to listen to stories the most. Yeah, wow. that is very interesting. And the second important thing is that they are not coming to listen to English stories. Yeah. So what are popular are Gujarati stories, Marathi stories, Kannada stories, Bengali stories, Odia stories. So those are like super popular. So the immediate thing that I can sense is that there might be groups of people, schools, universities, communities. I know there are a lot of communities in North America, in Canada, Indian communities, which would like to, they have these community events in which they would like to have a storyteller come and tell. That's the kind of connection that we can possibly, I'm very excited about that. Imagine a small group of, a community, a Sindhi community in California, which wants, in one of their community meetings, to have a Sindhi storyteller, virtually telling a story or a bunch of stories virtually. Yeah, that's the kind of possibilities that can happen. So because we reach out to that audience can find those storytellers, and which also means that the storyteller earns from it or draws some professional value, and the children also kind of get to listen to stories in their mother tongue.
Absolutely. And there are stories which are already there on the platform, which is for consumption. And it's a kind of a platform that anyone would like to use as a stepping stone to reach out to work with a larger audience. So I'd like to offer all my Hindi and Bangla stories to you, Ajay. I'm going to send you the stories over to you. You add them to yours because they're already on my podcast. It does not matter at all, which is out there, and which is great because it's just an audio platform. So audio is a wonderful non-threatening platform, again, for any storyteller, for anyone to just record at home, low cost. I don't have to show my face. I don't need this light on my face to light it up, and I don't need to do my hair, and I can still do a great audio story. So I think it's a great beginning. But while you were talking today, Ajay, and we've not spoken about this, and I'm going to pitch it to you right away, which is in Japan, there is a program which, a government-run program where they create or they work towards building storytelling grannies, storytelling grandmothers. So it's a government-funded initiative, government-driven initiative to bring a sense of respect, bring a sense of ownership, bring a sense of purpose to the aged. And particularly storytelling. So they train grandmothers to tell stories, and these storytellers are then go to schools to tell stories. and they not just earn an income, but they get a life outside their home. So they are now mobile. They have a sense of day. Where do they want to do? What do they want to achieve in that day? And it's sort of creating beautiful impact in not just in classrooms, but in the life of senior citizens in Japan. Now, coming from there, that's the other thing which I would really like to explore with the Kahani Project, because you work with senior citizens and you have had grandmothers and grandfathers and people, let's say, beyond the silver years, coming and telling stories on your platform just as a volunteer. Why don't we run a workshop? Why don't we run a program where they just learn a few of these storytelling tricks and techniques? And here you have a second career. And if we can get it funded through something, through Gift a Story, then all of it gets implemented in creating good quality audio stories by senior citizens. And who knows, they may have a second career as a storyteller.
Absolutely. I love the idea. I think this is a remarkable idea, very powerful. Yeah, I mean, I wish every child has a grandmother like I had, who would have a potpourri of stories to tell from every time, I think this is a great idea. We should dig deeper and talk about how we can do this.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it takes to have two storytellers talk and they come up with some more crazy ideas to work with. But I think that's what happens when you share a vision and you share a purpose. And that's what drew me to Kahani Project. And I'm very excited. So on behalf of all my tribe members, Ajay, welcome to the family. We are looking forward to doing some exciting things together. There will be a few announcements. There'll be a few, events which are lined up. So we're going to keep you posted. For everything else, for good audio stories, go to the Kahani Project and come to your story bag for all things other than what you don't get at Kahani Project. If you're like looking for a story or a storyteller, or if you're looking to know about how to tell stories, we have everything packed up and sorted. So come ahead and join us, and go ahead and share this video with anyone who you think will benefit from this little announcement, with this little development, or just a streak of idea. If you're a storyteller and you'd like to contribute to Ajay and the Kahani Project, reach out to him. All the details are in the description below. So until the next story, thank you so much, Ajay. Thank you for taking your time to talk to me.
Thank you. This was a great conversation. Loved it. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Happy stories.